Hello, I'm Michael Hanscom. I'm Highline College's Program Manager for Accessible Technology, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about VPATs and EAAPs. Now, for those new to these terms, the first thing to know is that they're not the newest Pokemon. Now, a VPAT is an Accessibility Conformance Report. The Accessibility Conformance Report is a document that describes a particular product's accessibility features. The VPAT, or Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, is simply the most commonly used form of conformance report. And then an EAAP is an Equally Effective Alternative Access Plan, which is just a way to say, this is the plan for when something isn't entirely accessible, this is what we're going to do to make up for that. So, according to the new Highline Contract 304.4, all commercial online textbooks and instructional software used in a course must have an accessibility conformance report, such as a VPAT, and an EAAP on file with the college at the time of adoption. Now, VPATs and EAAPs are necessary for any newly adopted commercial online textbooks and instructional software. So, physical textbooks with an additional online component, electronic textbooks, whether it's downloaded as an EPUB or if it's web-based, and any software used in the class beyond what Highline already provides. So, the software that Highline provides has already been reviewed and approved for use. If you incorporate additional software beyond that, it needs to be reviewed for accessibility and then have its own VPAT and EAAP on file. Existing material may be used as is for now, although we do recommend reviewing and updating existing material as you have time, just to make sure you avoid any sudden scrambles if you have a student who does require accessibility features. Now, an accessibility conformance report summarizes how well any given product conforms to accessibility standards. A product is likely going to meet some standards while failing others. These reports are a snapshot and can and probably will change over time. And it's only a tool to assess the qualifications of a product. No product is going to be 100% accessible. Having a conformance report does not guarantee that a product meets accessibility requirements. And not having a conformance report does not mean a product is inaccessible, it's just a lot more difficult to verify. We recommend that accessibility conformance reports should have been completed within the past 24 months. Of course, the more recent the report, the more reliable it will be. And if all there are older accessibility conformance reports, we'll accept them, but they may be out of date, not current to the current version of the software or product, and this may end up requiring a little bit more work as you're building the EEAP. The VPAT, or Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, is the most commonly used type of accessibility conformance report. The VPAT's not an enforced standard. Some companies will use their own form of conformance report, but it'll cover the same basic information that the VPAT does. Most of the VPAT is a series of tables listing accessibility criteria and how well the product supports these criteria. And there may be further explanations of how specific features are supported, partially, or even unsupported. There are 3 compliance levels to be aware of. The first, level A, is minimal compliance. These are the most critical features. If a product doesn't support these, it can basically be considered functionally inaccessible. Level AA is acceptable compliance, and this is the level of accessibility that Highline targets. This is what we would like products to meet. Level AAA is optimal compliance. These are features that are not required, but if a product supports them, that's an excellent thing to know about. So this is an example of a recent VPAT from Zoom, which you're all likely very familiar with at this point. The first page of a VPAT is basically just basic information about the product, contact information for the company creating it, and then a little bit of information on how the product was tested for accessibility, particular software, particular versions, anything along those lines. Here we have page 4 of Zoom's VPAT. On this page, we're looking at some of the level A accessibility criteria. The table divides this into the particular criteria being evaluated, whether or not the criteria are met. In this case, Zoom supports all of these criteria, and then some additional remarks, just giving a little bit more information about how exactly the product supports the criteria. This is from a little further on, and don't worry if this is a little bit too small to read right now. We'll zoom in just a moment. But this is looking at some of the AA criteria. And in this case, we have one particular criteria that is listed as supports with exceptions, and one that is listed as not applicable. Here's a zoom into the criteria that was listed as supports with exceptions. In this particular case, it's audio description pre-recorded, and zoom gives a little bit more information as to exactly what it means that they say supports with exceptions. Now we've jumped ahead to some of the level AAA criteria, and in this case we have a couple instances where Zoom is listing these as does not support. So here we've zoomed in a little bit to the audio description controls entry, which Zoom lists as does not support, but again, this is in the level AAA section, so these are criteria where it would be really nice if it were supported, but it's okay if it doesn't. Now, when you're looking for VPATs, first thing to do, especially if you're looking at textbooks, is ask your publisher representative about VPAT support for their product. If you're looking at software, you can do a web search for just the product name VPAT or accessibility conformance report. Some companies will post their performance reports publicly. Other companies ask that you email them to get a copy of the performance report, and they'll send it to you then. If you're having problems finding something, go ahead and contact us at the Accessible Technology Department, and we'll do our best to assist you with that. In fact, when you're talking with publishers, we are more than happy to come to the meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, and sit and talk with the publisher representative with you to make sure the right questions are asked. So now moving on to the EAP, or Equally Effective Alternative Access Plan. So EAPs define how students who are unable to access a classroom resource can still have access to the information that they need for the class. And it's important to know that having an EAP does not have to mean that everything planned is in place and ready to go immediately. What we want here is a plan so that we know that you have considered this and thought about this, and so when a student comes in who needs this information, you're not being caught off guard and scrambling at the last moment trying to figure out how to get them what they need. So this is a quick look at an early draft of Highline's Equally Effective Alternative Access Plan document. The first page here is just basic information about the product, what it's going to be used for, who you are. The second page starts getting more information about what are the issues with the product, and then as the document goes on, we start planning out how those will be accounted for. Now, as I said, this is currently in development. The final product will probably look something different than what's on screen here, but this gives you a basic idea of what you'll be looking at eventually. So when trying to figure out what goes on to the EPAT, best way is just to look at the VPAT or the conformance report. Look primarily at any level A or AA features that are marked supports with exceptions or not supported, and think about what that's going to mean. What will it be like for a student who cannot access the information conveyed because of this issue? And if an important portion of that resource is not accessible, how else can you convey that information to the student to make sure they have what they need to complete the class successfully? Moving on to the next part of the 304.4 and OER materials. So open educational resource materials and software must be reviewed by college staff and an EAP filed by the third quarter in which they are used. This is because we understand that OER material is often instructor created and it often may not have an accessibility conformance report. The platform used to create OER material may have a conformance report, but this is not necessarily the same thing as a conformance report for the material created by the platform, so keep that in mind if you start looking for these. If no conformance report can be found, contact Accessible Technology, and we can do a quick review of the product, of the OER material, to make sure that to identify any issues that might be there, and then work with you to create an EAP for anything that we find. Again, continuing on with 304.4, for both commercial and OER materials, procuring the VPAT and creating the EAP is a partnership between the faculty and the college accessible technology experts. What this means is that we know this seems like a lot, and there aren't always obvious immediate solutions, but you're not on your own. We're here to help. If you get stuck finding or interpreting VPATs, if you're creating an EAP and get a little bit lost or can't figure out what it needs to cover, email us and we'll do our best to help We can join you in conversation with your publisher representatives to make sure that you're asking the right questions or the right questions are being asked to make sure that materials are accessible. And then I host twice weekly Accessible Technology Open Zoom sessions where you can drop by at any point and ask questions about VPATs, EAPs, or anything else accessible tech related. I host these on Wednesdays from 3:30 to 4:15 p.m. and Thursdays from 3 o'clock to 3:45 p.m. And that's it. Now, everything in this presentation and some of the supporting documents that I showed may be downloaded. Just go to the bit.ly link. You can type it out, or you can just pause this video, scan the QR code, and you can have all this for reference in the future. Thank you much for watching, and as I said, feel free to get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to help if you need it.